Okay, so here's the pitch. You are cordially invited to bond your time, your talent, your treasure with a group of people that you've never met, that usually meet in a building or a sacred space that you've never been to, or perhaps only once or twice, and to gather in digital worship with a worship team and lay leaders with a couple hundred of glorious souls on this weird thing called Zoom, and to affirm a covenant regardless of all that in the middle of a pandemic that has upended everything. How does that sound? Sounds like a sweet deal, right? Well, dear wonderful UUCR family, these brave and intrepid souls have done just that. And actually, I went back and counted, it's almost 24 since the beginning. They have said yes to us, to our future, to each other. And as Brian Andreas reminds us, say yes. Whatever it is, say yes with your whole heart. And simple as it sounds, that's all the excuse life needs to grab you by the hands and start to dance. Say yes. Say yes, that's not so easy though, is it, right? It's hard to say yes to life. Too often we fold inwards into ourselves, our pods of our lives, our jobs, our homes, our families, our friends, our routines and habits and preferences. And maybe we stretch. Maybe we experiment and play. Maybe we make space to dance the sacred dance of life. It is said in recovery circles like Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous that the most important person in the room is the newcomer. I've heard for a variety of reasons as to why that is actually said. The most important person in the room is the newcomer. Some say it's because others can show the newcomers what a sober, abstinent, or faithful life looks like, that it's possible. Others say because the newcomers are the reason why there continue to be meetings, for them to be able to come. I've also heard that the newcomer is the most important person in the room because they have stories to share that we have not yet heard or received. I love that. I love that. They have stories we haven't received yet. They have insight and wisdom and knowledge and inspiration that we haven't experienced yet. So honored, esteemed newcomers and not so newcomers and relatively newcomers, you have that experience, that wisdom, your hopes and your dreams that are new to us perhaps. Your one wild and precious life is utterly unique, and therefore, dear newcomer, you are the most important person in this sacred space. By you saying yes to us, you are saying yes to a commitment to show up and be known, to share your stories, and to worship, serve, and build with us. And we have so many stories to share of the travels and journeys, of our heartbreaks, and the lessons hard learned, of our faith, of our childhoods. Writer Christina Baldwin reminds us that words are how we think. Words are how we think, but stories are how we link. The essence of a people are our stories. The essence of our people is our stories. It is how we come together, reflect on the past, and build towards our shared future. And storytelling has a prominent role in our Jewish kin's faith and practice. Last night, as you perhaps saw in the chat, our Jewish kin gathered together for the first night of Passover. Happy Pesach to any beloveds here today. May you have a happy and joyous Passover. Now, Passover is the festival of freedom, commemorating the Israelites' exodus from Egypt and marking their liberation from slavery. Each year, the telling and the retelling of the account from Exodus is told during the Seder, the ritual and sumptuous meal around the dinner table. And do you know when the first Passover was celebrated? While the Jewish people were still wandering in the desert. That was the first Passover. On their way to the land that was promised to them by God. 1 year after the exodus from Egypt, God directed the people to observe Passover. And that got me thinking about where we are right now. In some ways, we are all wandering and wandering, not just the pandemic, not just perhaps the state of our country and our world, not all of the injustice and the suffering and all of the things that break our hearts again and again. We are all wandering on some level as we are trying to figure out what and who and how we are to be. I've said before that curiosity is a spiritual practice. Well, questioning and wondering and wandering are all spiritual practices as well. So we say yes. We say yes to the dance of life because we exist in relationships. And I'd like to balance out the questioning and the wandering and the wondering together with the often refrain of before we speak, perhaps we consider, is it true? Is it necessary? And is it kind? Now, I've noticed, I'm going to veer off for a second. I noticed some comments in the chat. And this is a public space where we are wandering together and we are wondering together. But perhaps sometimes we can think, is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? And is this the right place to share? Beloveds, there is deep trust, but also there are deep gifts that are being offered up here in this space as we're creating and co-creating worship together as a spiritual community. So, how do we dance and say yes to life? Vidya Krishnamurti wrote that no one can live without relationships. We may withdraw into the mountains, become a monk, a sannyasi, wander off into the desert by ourselves, but we are all related. We cannot escape from that absolute fact. We do not exist in isolation. We do not exist in isolation, beloveds. In this time of social distancing and yet remaining spiritually close means that we offer grace. Grace again and again, because as we said this morning, welcome home. You have been found. We have found each other. So welcome home. And grace abounds. Grace abounds because it's hard to be in relationship. It's hard to work things out and figure it out together as we are wandering towards that promised land that we're building together. And that takes a bit of commitment because conversations are hard. That spiritual curiosity that we are called to embrace in this time is hard. It takes a moment to pause and reflect. Thinking about the impact, regardless of our intent, thinking about our love and kindness that we're extending or asking for. And that comes to me too. As we're working together, I'd like to share a really exciting project that's emerging, an invitation of sorts, as we're continuing to adjust to hold this community together so we can thrive. So the engagement team has been meeting every other month or so. The engagement team is different than pastoral care and different from some of our other circles, thinking about how do we connect? How are we engaging each other? How are we nurturing each other's spiritual growths? And how and what can we do to make that come alive more? So I'd like to share an exciting project the engagement team is working on, neighborhood caring circles, neighborhood caring circles, and we're going to be putting together small pods of 10 or 12 homes, families, couples, people, and connecting everyone who lives together. Now, I know we have some folks who are outside our immediate area, and even a geodiverse group for our beloveds outside of Maryland will be put together as well. How cool is that? Wouldn't you like to know if a UCR beloved is just a few streets down and you can drop off some freshly baked cookies, or maybe wash their car as a surprise? Maybe don't do that. A neighbor did that for me a few months ago and it was wonderful, but I was like, oh, interesting. Wouldn't it be wonderful to connect with those who are closest to each other, to build as we are moving forward as a community? Not only will you be able to get to know other UCR kin, you'll get to know your neighbors. Stay tuned for updates and more exciting invitations. And beloveds, we do not exist in isolation. We are all related. And so on this Membership Sundays, we welcome and celebrate our newcomers and everyone who has said yes to this beloved community since the beginning of the pandemic. Welcome home. Welcome home. If you've been here for a year or 30 years or 40 years, welcome home. And I'll close with this proclamation from my colleague, Reverend Ted Gallardo. We cast not our eyes below. We say to ourselves, we are how we came, wounded from our struggles, triumphant in our survival, entitled by birthright to belong to this, the only humankind there is, saying we are included, we belong, we are here, we will be, we will do. We will breathe joy into desolation. We will breathe peace into conflict. We will breathe life into destruction. We will be the earth we wish to know. We are growth and hope and glee. Amen. Blessed be, and Ashe.